Plans for a new state in northern Mali with links to al-Qaeda are complicating an already unstable situation. Just what are the regional implications of an Islamic territory in the West African country? You're watching Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Dareen Abughaida. Two rebel groups that took over northern Mali earlier this year had agreed to form an alliance and create an Islamic State. Ansar al-Din is said to have links to al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, while the National Movement for the Liberation of the Azawad, or the MNLA, is led by the Tuaregs. The two sides signed an agreement on Saturday, but now that deal appears to be unraveling, and that's because they disagree over how strictly to impose Islamic law, or Sharia. Ibrahim Asali, a member of the MNLA, says this: "We have refused to approve the final statement because it is different from the protocol agreement which we have signed." He then went on to say it is as if they want us to dissolve into Ansar al-Din, and that is unacceptable. Well, the West African bloc, ECOWAS, was quick to reject the idea of an Islamic State in northern Mali, and the newly elected French president, meanwhile, he was categorical. He said that France would only consider involvement in Mali under a framework of a UN Security Council decision. Well, the conflict in Mali began in March. Now, there was a coup led by low-ranking soldiers at the time. They were angry at what they said was a failure by the government to stamp out a separatist rebellion in the north. They attacked various parts of Bamako, including the presidential palace. And within 24 hours, they had announced they overthrew the elected government of President Amadou Toumani Touré. 3 weeks later, the coup leaders agreed to relinquish power to an interim government, but by then it was too late, and the rebellion in the north had split the country in two. All right, so what are the implications of an Islamic State in northern Mali? To answer this, we're joined by our guests in London: Shiraz Maher, a senior fellow at the International Centre for Study for Radicalisation at King's College London. We have in Leeds Akli Sh'kka, who's a spokesman for Imuharg Organisation for Justice and Equality. Akli is also a human rights advocate for the Tuareg and Berber people in Mali. And over in Dubai, Sylvain Touati, associate fellow for the French Institute for International Relations and also a specialist on African politics. Welcome all of you gentlemen to this edition of Inside Story. Sylvain, if I can come over to you first, how do you read into the situation that's going on in the north of Mali after the rebels group, as I'm saying, take control of that part of the country? Now it appears to be differences between the two. What are you thinking?
But first, it's not really a surprise that Ansar Din and MNLA have been talking to each other. You have to remember that the leader of Ansar Din is a former member of the MNLA. He was a spokesperson for the previous rebellion, and so you always have contacts between MNLA and Ansar Din. Even we have some report at the beginning of the rebellion that he created Ansar Din because he couldn't take over the leadership of MNLA. So we've seen during the offensives of the rebellion for the different groups from the rebellion that they have been acting together, even if there is some rivalries between the two groups. Most of the members of Ansar Din were Tuaregs themselves. The agenda a little bit different. Ansar Din has always been pushing for an Islamic agenda in northern Mali, while MNLA has been claiming that they pushing for secularism. The fact that they found an agreement is also showing that for the last 2 months, since they took power in northern Mali, these groups, and also you can include al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, but also you have other groups in the north now, it's very difficult to find one person to discuss, to negotiate with Bamako or with ECOWAS.
Right,
and I think this agreement was welcomed by Mr. Bassole from Burkina Faso, who was saying, at least now we will have one interlocutor for the negotiation.
Okay, we will talk about how this affects Bamako.
Yeah.
We will talk about how this affects Bamako, but just tell me what you think, how you think this split is going to impact the deal that was made between Ansar al-Din and the MNLA to create the state, if it's going to impact it in any way.
Of course. We've seen that in 3 days You have some people within the MNLA that say, okay, maybe we went too far with this deal with Ansar-Din, and it's really interesting that only 3 days afterwards they finally read what is the protocol they signed. Ansar-Din is really clear about his agenda. They want to promote an Islamic State imposing Sharia to the population of northern Mali. MNLA, some members of MNLA have always been pushing for secularism. So the deal is going to be about this, we're going to see the element between the two groups are going to negotiate and find or not an agreement about that. Also, you have to remember that MNLA was claiming about secularism to try to get the attention from Western countries. The MNLA at the beginning of the rebellion was claiming, okay, if we can maybe get some funding or some weapons from Western countries, at least MNLA is recognized as an official interlocutor for the problem in northern Mali. They maybe will fight against al-qaeda in Islamic Maghreb, and that's been the dream of many security services in Europe or in the US, to have one group in northern Mali that can fight against al-qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb.
All right.
And,
okay. Let me bring in Akli Sh'kka.
Ansar-Din is not going to help that.
Okay, we'll talk about that in just a moment. But first, Akli Sh'kka, would you call this a split now between Ansar-Din and the MNLA? How do you see it playing out?
No, I don't think it's split. It's just to maybe some mistakes that been on the protocol that have been signed between MNLA and Ansar-Din, and because the majority of MNLA or the majority of Azawadian people, they are not happy about the imposing Sharia or Islam in Azawad. So it's very obvious that there is some amendments to this agreement to go ahead, and I think as well it's really a good step forward when we hear this. The Ansar-Din and MNLA have united, and they are combined now. They have one army in Azawad. Excuse me. I think some people actually misunderstood Ansar-Din and the MNLA as Mr. Touati was saying. The leader of this movement, the Ansar-Din, is already one of the Tuareg figures who very well known as a leader. And at the beginning of the MNLA, I think he's tried actually to lead this movement, because many people, majority of Azawadian people, are not happy with him because they call him as a failure man. And that's why I think that's the mistake that many people actually committed for the beginning, and that's why he recruited many people, and he was saying that I am going to impose Sharia, and my agenda is to have an Islamic state without bordering, and that's why the many groups in Islamic Maghreb, they use this void. And the MNLA finally find themselves actually with a big problem, unexpected actually problems with the many groups that was hiding in the vast Sahara. They find them actually recruited by Ali, and that's why the first condition on this protocol that the MNLA put on them is a refusal any foreign groups in Azawad. We are not going to negotiate or have any deal or accept any outsiders who is fighting with you. And that's why the Ansar-Din accepted it, and they said, okay, we are not going, all the groups that Azawadian people are going to leave the country, and but we have a condition just to put the Islam as a Zawad Islamic State. And that's, I think, MNLA are very, very actually intelligent or smart, because already there's the majority of Azawadian are Muslims. So what's wrong if we put this and avoid internal fighting with these groups and wait for chance of the community, international community, and who want to fund us and help us to chase these groups outside of territory.
All right.
And,
okay. Let's
also,
Shiraz Maher, what's your take? Do you agree with what Akli Sh'kka there is saying, as well as Sylvain?
Well, I think when we're looking at Ansar al-Din here and the prospects of this relationship unraveling, I'm slightly more pessimistic. I think it's going to come down to how the interpretation of Sharia and its implementation is going to play out. Now, it looks like the MNLA are not so keen to impose such a conservative view, and Ansar al-Din, I think, given links to al-qaeda that might exist, particularly with al-qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, and then with other groups as well. The movement for unity and jihad in West Africa, for example, has been making noises about what's happening in Mali and moving into the area as well. And I think if their influence wins over, then Ansar al-Din will take a much more uncompromising view, and then there's a potential for internal fighting between the two groups if it comes down to it. But given, as the other contributors have mentioned, that Iyad Ghali has connections with the MNLA, he's from them, he was their spokesman and so on, if they're able to win him over, I think, and as it were, maintain this idea of keeping the unity there and avoiding infighting, then it all really comes down to him and who can win him over, I suppose, to their agenda. That's what's going to matter, and that will dictate whether this goes into conflict or not.
Akli?
Yeah. Yes, I think I'm agree with him a lot of things that he said. But the good thing about this agreement or this protocol that have been signed between EU groups is the Tuareg people since 1990, since 1963, the problem they have got whenever they came to the end of fighting, they return their guns to each other, and this is the experience that the MNLA have, and that's why they're trying to avoid and this fighting with the any groups, and to just focus to how they collect all the Azawadian people towards the creation of Azawad. And that's why the agreement actually, I think the winners here actually the MNLA and the Azawad people, and also the even the region actually, when we avoid this fighting between groups, and especially there's a lot of groups like Tawheed and others who just roaming in the area without any control, they can use that avoid as well, attacking neighboring countries, and they so this is actually a good move, and I think the MNLA need to focus about how to make that Ansar al-Din to make some concessions, and that's what they're trying to do now, because the Sharia law, it has many interpretations actually. When you say Sharia, it's not in Islamic actually. We have two types of Sharia law. The type that the Ansar al-MNLA agreed with is the modern one. It's not one is going to cut off the hands or prevent women going outside. No, that's not kind of the one the MNLA actually agreed with the Ansar al-Din.
Right. Sylvain, let me just pick up on a point that you brought up a little earlier on. And of course, knowing what happened back in March during Mali, the coup there at the time, do these differences now that appear to be occurring between Ansar al-Din as well as the MNLA, do they simplify negotiations with the rebels when it comes to Bamako, or is it just complicating an already unstable situation in Mali? Also, we know that ECOWAS has come out and said that they categorically reject any creation of an Islamic State in the north of the country. So what can ECOWAS do at this point?
But the thing for ECOWAS, and at least even the authorities in Mali, even if the authorities in Mali have too much problem to deal with between them before going to negotiate in the north right now. The thing is for ECOWAS, and it was a spokesperson, Mr. Bassole, we were saying that at least to find one group to negotiate, or at least to have one interlocutor in the north, because okay, we focus on Ansar al-Din and MNLA, but those are two people also mentioned the other groups, and you have to also remember something in northern Mali. You don't only have Tuaregs. Tuaregs are only one part of northern Mali. You have Arab population, you have more, you have also the Pearl, you have different people there, and they have also the vision about this rebellion that is maybe not going to agree with what MNLA and Ansar al-Din are negotiating right now. But for ECOWAS, at least that the main armed rebel group are gathering together and they can find an agreement between them, ECOWAS will find someone to discuss with. But we're not going to change anything about the basic of the conflict. These two groups are now proclaiming an independent state that ECOWAS is not going to accept, and all the countries in the region are not going to accept it, and that's going to be not going to change this line in the negotiation.
Shiraz, what do you think ECOWAS's options are?
Well, just before I comment on that, I wanted to add a caveat to what Sylvain was saying, and I think this is it. All the discussion of the relationship between the MNLA and Ansar al-Din, and how they're trying to avoid this internal conflict is happening at the leadership level. But you have to appreciate the MNLA has been campaigning for and fighting for independence for a very long time, and at the grassroots that has been a campaign which has been not Islamist, largely secular, and so if a leadership deal is made to avoid infighting and which concedes power to the Islamists, there's every chance that at the grassroots people will rebel against the leadership of the MNLA. So the prospect for conflict still remains very high. With regards to ECOWAS and their options in Mali, I don't think they really have many options. I think the creation of an Islamic State of whatever color that will take place in Mali is going to be welcomed in the region regardless. The Arab Spring has heralded the creation of post-dictatorial Islamic states. The Ennahda party has taken power now in Tunisia. We're seeing the Muslim Brotherhood make great strides in Egypt. And of course, the Al-Nur party has taken a number of parliamentary seats. It looks like Morsi could obviously win the presidency there as well. So the sort of Islamists and Islamic states, if you want to call them that, are emerging now in North Africa post-Arab Spring. And Mali, in that context, is no different. So ECOWAS, I think, is going to be very limited in what it can really do and to bring pressure to bear on them.
All right, well, let's just discuss a further point, because it appears that there seems to be a rise in parts of Africa of groups that are eager to implement their own interpretation of Sharia or Islamic law. Let's take a look at some examples. In Somalia, for example, the al-Shabaab group controls southern parts of the country with links to al-Qaeda. Its members describe themselves as fighting what they call the enemies of Islam. In Nigeria, Boko Haram strongly opposes what it describes as man-made law. Based in the northeast of the country, the group wants to abolish the secular system of government. And over in Algeria, the AQIM, al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, is a militia group, and it wants to overthrow the Algerian government and introduce what it calls an Islamic State. Sylvain, over to you. The situation in Mali, does it pave the way for other groups to declare independent states of their own, you think?
No, it's a special situation that you can find in northern Mali and maybe in northern Niger, even if the situation right now has a little bit changed. You have to remember that even if the MNLA has claimed independence in April, it was quite a surprise for the people who were following the movement, because this claim of independence was really huge in the 1970s, 80s. But with the rebellion in 1990s afterwards, we didn't have this claim for independence anymore, at least among the elite of the Tuaregs. It was more claim for more autonomy and everything. And I think the fact that the crisis in Bamako pushed the MNLA and the other group in the north to say, look, we don't have anyone in Bamako. Anyway, the state in northern Mali has never been really present. So let's go back to our claim of independence. And no one in Bamako could do anything about it at the moment. And even ECOWAS, even if ECOWAS deployed troops in northern Mali, is to create a buffer zone. No one wants to really get involved in northern Mali, like putting a soldier on the field and or anything like that. So if the group in northern Mali find an agreement and they find some funding, international funding to finance their government, they can become an independent state. But
and where would
really
they find such international funding from? Where would they find such international funding?
Just to come back on this rise of this Islamic claim also in northern Mali, and that maybe could answer to some of your question, is the fact that the most powerful and at least the most funding group in northern Mali at the moment was between Ansar Dine and MNLA was Ansar Dine, with his link with al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb. For the last decade, the al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb and other rebel groups in the north have been protecting different trafficking. They also have you have a very lucrative hostage businesses that has been on for the last 5 years. We're talking about 120 million euros in northern Mali. That helps you to buy some loyalty. It helps you also to gain some recruits among the region of northern Mali, which is one of the poorest in the world.
Right.
And even if you have an independent state in northern Mali, what will be is capacity to develop this region. We're talking about a desertic region. There are not many prospects about agriculture or about any economic development, and the Tuareg rebels are making a really good stand about it. The fact that this region needs to be developed economically.
Akli
And by
Sh'kka,
claiming the Islamic things, you can get some money maybe from Gulf states
let's
or from
put some of what you've brought up,
organizations.
Sylvain, to Akli. Let's just put some of these points to Akli. Akli, seeing as there is this link between Ansar al-Din and al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, and now Ansar al-Din and the MNLA have joined forces, how much collusion is there between the MNLA now and al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb? And is it, should it be worrying?
To be honest, for me and for many people, the experts who know the area very well, including Jeremy Keenan, I don't know if you heard about the Dark Sahara, the book which he wrote about the rule of Islamic al-Qaeda in Islamic Maghreb. I think it gives a really a clear picture of what's really going on. And al-Qaeda actually is intelligence services of Algeria and countries who don't want the Azawad or the Tuareg people have their own state, whether in Algeria or Libya or in Niger. And what's happening in the north of Mali or Azawad is this the same groups who recruited actually by these countries, and this is the time they want to use them. And I am not actually, I don't trust Iyad Aghali actually as a man who's working for the interest of Azawad people, because if you think about it, and it's now 53 years, and the Zawad people, the Tuareg people actually are fighting for this, and they got it without any blood, without any losses, and it's one of the most succeed, revolutions in the what they are calling the Arabic Spring or Arabic Spring. Without any support, they didn't take any support from outside or inside. They just fight, and they got this very easily without any losses. And now they managed actually to avoid another trap, which is trying these groups actually to bring, since the beginning, almost a month now, these groups actually are picking on MNLA and the others to fight with them. But the MNLA are very, I think they have done very well on this, and they avoid a lot of problems. And they bring now whoever saying that MNLA or Ansar al-Din, they are controlling the Azawad. I think that's a really big mistake. They just don't want actually to fight with these groups, because it will be a bloodshed, and they will get problems, and they are not ready actually to internal fights.
Let me get Shiraz's thoughts.
I mean, following on from what your last contributor was saying, I think it's incorrect to say that what's happened in Mali has not been affected by the Arab Spring, and that it's entirely an internal thing. I mean, this would not have happened without Libya. The sophistication of arms, the heavy weaponry that has moved into Mali and supported the rebels there is a spillover from the war in Libya and a number of the mercenaries that were fought there. So the idea that Mali somehow being immune or is not interconnected to the politics of the region and the Arab Spring, I think is erroneous. As for al-Qaeda and the Islamic Maghreb, well, it is possibly the weakest and least potent of all of al-Qaeda's international chapters. So I think whilst they might be able to provide some institutional connections and some support, it's in no real position to influence things on the ground. I think much more interesting is Boko Haram in Nigeria and the connections there. And they've obviously shown themselves willing to use terrorism to indiscriminately bomb civilian populations. And so that is something that could influence Ansar al-Din and start to play out there.
Sylvain, let me get your thoughts. Shiraz, I do apologize, but Sylvain was shaking his head as you were speaking, as well as Akli was speaking. So, Sylvain, final thoughts to you.
No, I just want to say, of course, there is an interconnection in all the region, and what happened in Libya has affected the northern Mali. But the claim for independence of northern Mali is a very Malian issue. And even MNLA and Ansar al-Din alliance and the creation of Azawad State, you have to remember that the only common denominator for all the population in northern Mali is Islam. And the claim for an Islamic State is something important also to the other community in northern Mali. You have to remember in the previous conflict in northern Mali, the fact that Bamako, the government in Bamako, could support groups in the north that were not happy with the Tuareg leadership was really important. And the fact that claiming an Islamic State is also a signal to the other community in northern Mali. And that, if people don't understand that, it's also what the MNLA and maybe the other interlocutor was saying, that MNLA is very smart about that. It's the fact that the other community in northern Mali are going to maybe more keen to accept a government in northern Mali, or at least a certain form of authority around the Islamic religion, more than on Tuareg or autochthony claim. And that is something we need to keep in mind.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much to my guests. In London, Shiraz Maher, in Leeds, Akli Sh'kka, and in Dubai, Sylvain Touati. Thank you for joining us on Inside Story. And to our viewers, we always welcome your feedback. You can email your thoughts to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. Thanks for watching, and for me and the whole team, goodbye for now.